pass that back to Sister Trudy. And so you might think, well, I already have a sheet. But if you looked at last week's sheet, you'll see it had last week's lesson on it. This has this week's lesson. So every week I'll give you a new sheet. But I'll probably always put the table of contents and that outline of the book of Job in there so that you can refer to it if you want to. Also, I don't know if somebody comes to class, maybe you missed a week, so I want to make sure you have all the information every week. But I'll always have a sheet with the lesson on it. And if you looked at last week's lesson, you'll notice there's a lot of scriptures and a lot of things that for the sake of time we didn't cover. But the sheet goes into more depth than what we discuss here. Because we have, we're trying to respect the time and your schedule. But if you want to read ahead on your own, you can read ahead, or you can review what we did in a given week. I did change something. So there was a lesson 4 that I deleted, and lesson 2, when I really looked at it, it covers so much ground that I split it into 2 parts. So lesson 2 and 3 are really what I was going to do with lesson 2, and I got rid of lesson 4. It was going to kind of be an extra thing. It was relevant, but this is what we're going to do in lesson 2 and 3, I think, is more important. Okay, so, I want to re-discuss the outline of the book of Job. I'll probably do this many times because I think it's very important to see how it's organized. Because when you read it, these guys are wordy. They say a lot. They say a lot of things, and sometimes they say the same thing over and over again in multiple ways, and that's great. But you can get lost in you can lose the forest because there's so many trees in that forest. You can get lost in it. And brother, there's a sheet right there on the back of that pew. There's a sheet. And if you wouldn't mind, if other people come in, just hand them one. So the purpose of going over this outline is to help you kind of see the organization of the book. So when you read something, you kind of have a roadmap where you are. So the beginning of the book is where last week we covered it. We talked about how Job was a righteous guy. But unbeknownst to Job, the Satan and God had a meeting up in heaven. And the Satan said, God said Job is a righteous man. And he fears me. And the Satan said, yeah, but does he fear you just because you bless him? I think if he lost his stuff, he would curse you. And so God allowed him to take Job's flocks away, to have a wind come and knock his house down and kill his children. And he lost all of his servants. And Job still served God. He said, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. So the Satan went back to God a second time, and he said, yeah, well, Job might still serve you, but if you inflict trouble on his body, he'll curse you. And so God said, I will allow you to inflict his body. And so Job got sores all over his body. That's what we looked at last week. We're going to briefly look at the very last thing which we mentioned last week, and that is where his friends come to visit him. But before we get into that, there's this cycle. Job has 3 friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. And Job says something, and then Eliphaz answers. Job responds to that, then Bildad responds. Then Job responds to that, and then Zophar responds. That's a cycle. Each one of the 3 friends say something, and Job answers each one of them. That's cycle 1. Well, they're not satisfied, so they go for round 2. And they go through. Now, Zophar apparently has had enough. So in round 3, he doesn't say anything. But they go for round 3. And Job ends up with a long speech at the end after Bildad. And that's kind of the end of what he has to say in these arguments. So there's these 3 sequence of arguments back and forth between Job and the 3 friends. Then this other guy, who nowhere else in the book has appeared, and he doesn't appear anywhere else in the book. And he says, I'm a young guy. You all are old guys, and y'all got a lot of hot air. Y'all talk too much. You just say a lot, and you really didn't say what you need to say. But I'm going to straighten you out. And he takes about 5 chapters where he supposedly straightens them out. I'm going to tell you from reading it, you read it yourself. He really doesn't say anything new, but it is worthy of reading. He does say a lot of things that are very interesting. So that ends that process. Then there's another series of debates between God and Job. Any of you ever argue with God? You have? Yeah. You want to? You don't. It might be too personal, but you have something you argued with him about. You want to share? Don't want to share it. Yeah. If I did, I wouldn't want to share. I mean, I might. It depends what it is, but that's not something necessarily you want to make public. An argument with God is a private thing, but he has this argument. God says something, and then God challenges Job in chapter 40. And Job answers him. And then God gives a longer answer to that. And then Job basically says, Elihu said a lot of stuff, and I don't know if I agree with it, but one thing he said I agree with. I say too much. I'm just going to be quiet. He says, I give up. And then God restores Job back to his original position and even better. That's the outline of the book. Okay, so before we get into this week's lesson, any comments, questions, anything about last week or anything else that you want to say about Job before we get into it? Open season. Okay. Because now if you read it and you go, well, what's this or what's that? Or I saw something that really caught my attention. Feel free at any point, even if it's not about the lesson we're talking about. Okay, you got one? You got one? Okay. My question is, and before I ask the question, I want to tell you what I think about something so you're not unconfused. I believe, I am 100% confident that the Bible is from God and that it is entirely true. Period. Sometimes people say, but, you say to your wife, honey, you're so wonderful and you're beautiful and you cook well and you're just so sweet and you're lovely and all. You're almost spotless. But, and what does but mean? But means forget everything I just said, right? All that butter I put, you can just get rid of the butter. Doesn't count. I don't have anything. There's no but that I believe the Bible comes from God and that it's true. There is no but. It's a period. Okay? I have a question. And my question is everything that is in the Bible true? Give her a microphone. Give him a microphone. Yeah?
Everything in the Bible, it's true in the sense that it happened, but it's not necessarily true.
Okay.
And I think that's...
Give me an example. What do you mean by that? All right, what do you mean by that?
Well, I think what it is, what's written is true in the sense that it did happen.
Yes.
But what was said was not. It's not necessarily true.
It depends upon who said it.
Right.
Right? It depends upon who said it.
Right.
Some people say some things in the Bible that are not true.
That's true.
Anybody have an example?
what was,
Some people say some things in the Bible that are not true.
that's true.
Anybody have an example? Read what somebody said, and you already think this man is going to say some things that are not true. I think he says a lot of things that are true. A lot of things that are true. But there's some things he says about Job you don't agree with. Okay. How about when Abraham in Genesis 20, when he said that Sarah was his sister? Is that true? He was lying. Okay. How about when the Jews in John chapter 8 said that Jesus had a demon? Is that true? No. How about when the Jews went before Pilate and said, Jesus blasphemed against God, that's why we have to execute him? Was that true? No, that's a lie. That's a lie. And why did they lie? They lied because they didn't like the things he said, and they were making something up to get him. When Ananias and Sapphira said, we sold a piece of land and we're giving some money to the church, was that true? Yeah, no, that part was true. But when they said, we sold the money and we're taking all the money and give it to the church, that was a lie, right? So we looked at, was Job righteous or not? And we had a discussion about it because some people said he wasn't. And Job said he was. And I'm going to tell you, looking at him from my point of view, I could argue he was a pretty good guy, but then he says some things that I could criticize what he says in the book. And his friends took that a step further and said, you're utterly wicked. And you know, if I were there and I didn't know, because remember, we know what happened in heaven. Job and his friends were completely unaware of this conversation between Satan and God. We know it because the narrator tells us. They didn't know about that. All they knew was looking at Job, and they thought, well, he's suffering. He must have done something wrong. Now, I'm going to be honest with you and tell you, not only could I give in to that thinking, I have given in to that thinking. Where something bad happens, I go, oh, that is a direct consequence of your sin. Or I've seen good things happen and say that's a direct consequence, they must be righteous. I've done that. You know, I hate saying that on tape. I like to turn the tape off, but the truth is I have done this. And from their point of view, it's not a ridiculous thing to say. But we also discovered last week, God said Job was righteous and blameless and perfect and pure. Yes. Microphone. Well, Satan is a liar.
But you asked, was everything in the Bible true? So when Satan said what he said about Job, wasn't it a lie?
I don't know. What do you think? You turn the mic off.
It was a lie.
You think it was a lie? Okay. What part of what he said was true, where he said, let me do these things to him. That's not a lie. He just asked for permission.
When he said that.
When he said that Job would curse God. So you think it's a lie. I'm not going to disagree with you. I don't know whether that was a lie, whether he sincerely thought Job would, or whether he just said that to lie. I accept your statement, but I don't know. What do you think? Being deceitful. Not microphone.
Being deceitful, is that just being deceitful, or is that a lie?
Well, I'll say this. For sure, he was up to no good. I'm going to agree with that. He was up to no good. I'm going to leave it to y'all to decide, did he lie? I mean, if you think he did, I'm not going to take it away from you. I don't know.
Because I'm just thinking about when the serpent told Eve and Adam, well, told Eve, said that,